Hello everybody, this is Peter Svidler with my second Banter session of this week, and this one starts somewhat late by my standards. There were happier times when I didn't consider 10:30 particularly late, but ever since my boys were born I've become more and more of a morning person, and this means I probably will be even slower than usual, and my mood has been uh, further soured by the last arena run I tried before switching on go live button, and there will be about 5 of you out there who will understand what I'm talking about. But that arena run featured a 0-0 warrior who played Brawl, and then in game 2 my Shredder got MC tagged on turn 4. So I'm incredibly unhappy right now, and planning to take it out on some people. Quick check, do you hear me? Can you hear me? If yes, we'll probably just go on and start playing, because I really, after that run, I really am in no mood at all to do the run. Somebody, please tell me you can hear me before I can... Good. Okay, then we switch to the chess mode for now. It's very, very difficult not to become sad when people play Brawl. You have no idea how that feels when you've completely flooded the board against a class that has no AoE. Shouldn't be allowed. The Chigorin, which is an opening I never really studied properly at all, which is going to present a problem. This is supposedly, I think, the main line, but I think it's advisable to know a little bit more about this position than I actually do. I'm not sure if f3 is the correct way to go here, but I want my center as mobile as possible, and this is probably a little bit too slow actually, and he will get a lot of counterplay connected with f5 later in the game, or maybe even sooner in the game. Yeah, f5 now, I'm a bit slow. If I could reply to f5 by already playing knight c3, I think b6 is also a bit slow. I think he needed to challenge my center straight away. I don't think there is time for black to... I mean, he will not be hugely worse, but I think the time to play f5 was when, exactly, when my knight was still on g1. Because if you play f5 and I only play knight e2 in reply, you can take on e4 and force me to open the f file, which will then give black a very, very nice source of counterplay. But the way my opponent has done this, my center feels a lot more secure, and I'm a lot happier about my position. And f4, it's a possible way to treat this, but it does feel like it's untying my hands a little bit. Although knight d7, knight c5, and I mean, black will have some play of his own. But the thing about this, I am now no longer, I think, required to castle kingside, at least in the short run. And I will spend the next couple of moves doing something about his plan of knight d7, knight c5. Yeah, my idea is to transfer the bishop from d2, where it wasn't really doing very much, to a3, where it will put some pressure on the black queenside, sorry, and only after I've done that I will think about maybe castling kingside. Because if I do castle kingside, I give him some chances to create serious play on serious counterplay against my king by running the g-pawn down the board, because as of right now, his center feels very solid, and he will feel quite confident starting a pawn march. After queen h6, I mean, he obviously wants to play queen h4 check. I'm sort of tempted to give him that opportunity, because I don't think it's that big of a deal. But I think now the time has come to finish development. And then I will play bishop a3. I will play a5 if the knight lands on c5. The bishop probably should go to e2 to make the g4 plans a little bit weaker and make my kingside a little bit more stable. Although there is no direct necessity to do that. If he plays knight c5, I can play f5. I mean a5, sorry. After rook f7, I quite like this move. It means that he doesn't want to play knight c5 because the knight on c5 doesn't really support his kingside attack particularly well, and he wants to play knight f6 and g4 instead, which I very much like from him. And I will make this move bishop e2 right now. First of all, it works quite nicely as a kind of a, not defense exactly, but prophylaxis against future g5, g4. And also I want to have the opportunity to play d5, d6 later in the game, or maybe even immediately if he goes knight f6. And I keep my a5 ideas perfectly alive, of course. And here, yeah, this is now the critical question, whether I mean, c5 is fine, but d6 might be very strong straight away, and it feels quite tempting. Because I think it disrupts his kingside plans quite efficiently. And that's something I would very much like to do. Although, you know, after g4, I still will have to be very careful, because he can play if he can get g4 and g3 in, this will be very, very threatening regardless of how much material he actually sacrifices. So if he plays g4 here, for instance, I don't think I can take this knight, because I might actually be getting mated after g3. So I think g4 will almost always have to be met by me taking on g4. In this position as well. And after knight g6, my plan was to play knight d5 to try and get rid of this f6 knight. And then if the knight is exchanged off this f6 knight, if it's traded off, it will be much harder for him to create any kind of serious attack on the king side due to the fact that g4 I will just meet by taking. Yeah, the plan of rook f7, rook g7, g4, and mate is not a new one, and it's a very solid one. He can actually play g4 here, but I might be able to deal with those threats in this particular position. I take on f6 twice, he plays g3, and I can play h4. If you can envisage this position, I have a queen on f6. The pawn does get to g3, but after I play h4, he cannot recapture with the knight, because the knight is pinned along the 6th. And after queen g7, I feel I should be winning almost by force after queen d8 check. The only move is knight f8, sorry. And in this position, I'm sort of spoiled for choice. I might even choose to take on b6. I see nothing wrong with this move even, because black has no pieces which can attack the queen on d8, and I'm just winning a tremendous amount of material on the queen side. Not only am I a full piece up now, knight e7 check will pick up additional material next move. So this has to be completely winning for me. Yeah, this is a full rook now, and I'm also ahead on time, so very confident in my chances in this particular position. I don't actually prefer d4 to e4. It's just that I think, you know, when I started doing the banters on Chess24, I had this policy of sort of rotating through the first moves. I would play one game with e4, one game with d4, one game with c4, one with knight f3, and then return to e4. And then some time ago there was this groundswell of demands for me to play. I think maybe groundswell is strong, but there was a number of people who started requesting the King's Indian. And I thought it might be fun to sort of create this possibility of every single game being a King's Indian. And for that to happen, I needed to start playing more 1d4. So I am definitely playing more 1d4. Knight h6 against somebody rated 2684 was probably a bit of a mistake, because it does get, well, I mean, punished is strong. This position is still perfectly playable for black, but it's a bit risky. I think I probably should stop you know, fooling about so much in this particular game. And this is probably not a very good move. Although if knight d5 doesn't win, it kind of depends on whether he can play knight d5 and just sort of win the game there and then. That also is an overstatement, but if I have to play queen d8, I'm very sad. If he doesn't win, then at least I get d7, d6 in, which was my biggest issue with the position I had. Was there was so much pressure against the c6 knight that I felt that I need to chase away the knight from d4 before I could play d6. And d6 was something I badly wanted to play there. And now my position is fine. I mean, so is my opponent's, of course, but the pieces come out, I will play rook c8, and then we get a Maratzi bind type of structure, but black actually has the two bishops and white only has one, and generally having this dark squared bishop unopposed on g7 should be quite decent for black. I'm not sure this is the most precise way of playing the position I had there, but I wanted to start something. Why am I not rated 3100? I'm not rated 3100 because it's not my strength. I think very few people generally are rated this high on this or any other website, and those people generally play a lot more online blitz than I do. In the golden years of ICC, my highest rating was, I think, 3361. But that was when I played really a tremendous amount of online blitz every day, more or less. And I've been more or less retired since maybe 01 or 02. I'm not entirely sure when I decided to just stop playing playing blitz on the internet competitively, so to speak, completely, but it's definitely more than 10 years ago. I like my position on the one hand, but on the other hand, I'm not entirely sure just how much better I am here. It's a kind of a weird spot. Yeah, and that's quite well put, J Beast. And yeah, I'm especially in this format when I'm expected to do a lot of talking, I really am not particularly proficient at flagging people. This is a very important detail. This is the reason why I took on c4. If I had to play d5, e5, my advantage would be very negligible. But if this works, and if this actually forces my opponent to somehow protect the f2 pawn, and I get e6, e5 in this way, this bishop will be a monster. And then I'm quite sure I will be quite seriously better. Yeah, this position is lovely for black, obviously. This is such a huge bishop. It will still take some winning, of course. It's none of these positions are ever, easily winning by any stretch, but But it's obvious that black is quite seriously better here. How many chess books have I read fully? The number is very high, but it hasn't been growing to my own personal regret. I think I should still be reading quite a lot, and I'm not, frankly. I do read sort of incessantly, but I read fiction and non-fiction occasionally, but not really chess books. From what I've seen of Nagy's books, they are excellent, but they are really aimed at a reasonably high level of players, because you do need to be able to follow those walls of text somehow. I think that would be tremendously useful for me, for instance. But for someone rated, I don't know, let's say between 1900 and 2200, I think they will be of less use, because I think it's very, very difficult to fully grasp the intricacies of what he's saying there. But I do think they're excellent. This is not a criticism. I'm saying that here I have a very nice tactical shot which wins an exchange. I'm a little bit reluctant to do it, but it's such a nice geometrical motif that I will. I saw this when my opponent was thinking about bishop f1. Yeah, actually queen d1 doesn't lose the exchange, but I would maybe prefer to lose the exchange than the a pawn, actually, in a position like this, because this frankly is kind of completely lost. Okay, so far so good today, but I will probably at some point start playing slower and worse. I don't know why I keep on, telling you this will not be. Whoops! I don't know what did I do just? What did I just do? I did something weird, guys. Sorry, but I think it will correct itself once I accept the challenge. Yeah, that was a bit weird. My clicking skills are already on the wane, obviously. Oh, and I managed to click my way to a French player. No French for you, sir. Yeah, no French for you. I'm not in the mood. I've had a fairly rough day, and I'm really, really not in the mood for any of that foolishness. What am I supposed to do here? I wonder. I used to know, I think. But I'm no longer certain. And I feel this is way too slow. I think after queen c7 I'm supposed to be a lot more punishing than this. This feels slow and non-critical to me. Although I think h6 may have been slow as well, because it allows me to gain some space in the center. He could have just played knight g7 or d6. Do I need to worry about the g5 counterplay? Probably not at the time being. I will just ignore it for now. Finish development. Yeah, this is more normal, and this is actually... I should have thought about that for a bit longer than I have. Because if I play e5 now, he goes knight f5, and I cannot really play bishop f4. Which is sad. And the knight on d2 is frankly a little bit misplaced here. It should be on c3. I mean, I'd be much happy if it was on c3. And also, this is a 3-minute game, which means I should probably limit the conversation to the bare minimum, sadly. After queen b6, I will be forced into some contortions here, because it's not that easy to protect all of my stuff. But I think I can justify this move tactically. If he takes on e4, I can try playing d5, although my current thinking is it probably doesn't work. Or I can try knight ft2. And after a5, my plan was to continue with my sort of a gambit play and play queen somewhere so that I can play knight c5 after f4. I mean a4, sorry. But queen where? Here's the big question. Sorry. Yeah, now I'm happy. Now I'm very happy. This is... Actually, that was a bit hasty. I probably should have played something a bit slower than knight c5, because this is a good opportunity for black to take on e4. And because I don't have any d5 shenanigans, he will then play either knight d5 or knight f5, and my bishop on e3 will get traded off. So probably some other move was a bit smarter. Yeah. That was slightly misplayed, but I'm still quite happy about landing this knight on c5. It at least makes my position feel a little bit respectable. And now I have the second one on e5, which is also quite good. I have a threat of knight d7, which he parries by doing this. I'm not sure about entering this endgame. I'm trying to play faster, and that decision in particular I would question. I'm not sure this was a good move. Not at all sure. Knight f5 now is actually kind of awkward to meet, but I couldn't find any better squares. But even what my opponent is doing is perfectly fine. Although I think maybe I was slightly let off the hook there by him. Bishop f1 is probably not a good move, but I am in a bit of a weird spot timing wise. And I wanted to secure, let's say, the b5 square for this knight. I'm pretty sure this capture is not correct though, because it secures my knight on d6 and generally makes my life a lot simpler here. Should probably play h4. I mean, I should actually have played this when there was a pawn there. It was much stronger when there was a pawn there, but it's still playable even here. I will sadly lose on time though, which is unavoidable when you start playing as slowly, unless I get bailed out by my opponent or not. Yeah, this is I mean, somewhere here. First and foremost, this tactic which my opponent presented to me, bishop takes h6, more or less wins objectively in this position. But even here, I'm probably quite seriously better because my bishop is just better than his knight. But yeah, thanks to my opponent for not pressing on. People are taking mercy on me generally, that they realize they're playing an infirm person. Let me see if I missed something in chat whilst this was going on. Seemingly not. There's a lively discussion in chat on the veracity and current standing of my system by Nimzovich, and my fellow banter specialist Jan Gustafsson himself is famously really critical of the book and thinks it's completely useless in the current climate. I think that's a bit harsh, but I think you can probably live without. I feel it was very helpful to me when I was a kid because it does provide you, let's put it like this, it gives you a lot of food for thought. Not everything that he says is true. Probably by now you can more or less safely say that not everything in those books is gospel, but it does provide you with a lot of food for thought, and as such you probably shouldn't be sharply critical. Will I play Chess Explained again today? I'm not sure. Not that I'm dodging necessarily, I just I haven't seen his challenge yet, and I don't know if it's there. This frankly is quite decent for white, because I think it will be very difficult for me to prevent this plan of h3, bishop e3 and d4, after which white gets, I think, a very, very useful version of the Maratsi. I think this was not my best attempt to deal with the English. Probably just a4, because I think I will go for some kind of a, especially after a3. What am I doing? What the hell am I doing? Yeah, that is frankly just ridiculous, and I think my opponent decided not to embarrass me in front of whatever it is, however many it is of you out there, because e5 was just sort of winning on the spot. I was trying to play some, Volga Gambit type stuff, but it only is of any use if you don't lose a tremendous amount of material immediately, which I would do if had he played e5 there. Yeah, that was just stunningly inept. Do I get sleepless nights during tournaments? Absolutely I do, yes. Nervous system all shot to hell. At least now, e5 is still quite playable, but at least now I'm not losing a truckload of material there. Do I think playing the open games is essential for chess, for chess development? I actually kind of do, yes. I think having zero experience with things like the Sicilian or Spanish will be hugely detrimental in youth. I mean, you might want to settle on something else when you grow up, but I think having absolutely no exposure to those types of structures when you're growing up will be very much to your detriment. Because, I mean, in particular those two openings, they will provide you... I guess the plan is bishop b2, rook b1. I specifically included bc4, dc4 to play against knight e2, and now I realize that bishop takes b2, rook b1 is still an issue. But I still need to do this, I think. I still need to do this, and now I have a choice. Bishop takes a3 is a kind of a materialistic approach, and bishop e3 is an attempt to... It might get captured there, though. I was kind of leaning towards bishop e3, but then he goes rook b3, rook e8, rook f3, and where do I put it? I actually managed to play myself in some serious difficulty, because bishop a3 will be playable, but queen a1 is almost winning, I think. After queen a1, I think I lose more material. All this is very, very sad. But bishop e3 is also bad. So here, if he spots queen a1 with the threat of rook takes c8 and queen takes f6, I think I'm in dire straits. I think there could be some ways to try and not lose on the spot. f5 is a bit less concrete. f5 I'm not as worried about. As a matter of fact, I might want to try and... he wants fg6 and then stuff will be hanging as well. So this is also interesting. But queen a1 I think was close to completely winning for him. So I feel this is an improvement for me compared, so to speak. If I go queen e7, he takes. I would very much like to take with the h-pawn, because taking with the f-pawn feels very dangerous. But if I take with the h-pawn and he goes queen a1 again, I might once again be in a lot of trouble here. But at least this way I'm hitting the knight on e2, so I'm hoping this somehow works out for me. I'm not sure, but I'm very much hopeful it does, because once again, fg6 just gives him so much play against my king. This way I'm preserving my kingside structure to a degree, which I think is a matter of life and death in this position. Because the way I lose this is I just get mated soon. If I don't get mated in the next, let's say, 5 moves, then my position might actually become reasonably playable. If he goes queen a1 here, I want to take on e2, and this, I hope, will give me a position I can play. Because then I want to play queen bishop e6. I could also go knight d7. I forgot about knight d7. But that was sort of my plan. Rook f8, king f8 looks scary, but it's not that scary actually, I think. Unless bishop d5 just wins. I'm reasonably happy about this, although he probably has the perpetual here. I don't think I have, I don't think it's really sensible for me to try and avoid the perpetual. I can go king h7, queen h4 check, queen h5, but then he takes, he plays rook a1 and he picks up on a6, and I think that would be sort of disrespectful to my opponent to continue playing for a win there, because he's really done nothing better in this game apart from... Okay, so he disagrees. If he doesn't want to draw, we will of course play. I honestly don't think I'm worse here. I have 2 pawns for the exchange, and my king is reasonably safe. And I'm also getting mated. What am I talking about here? Yeah, that was a really, really poor move. I should have played king g8 and then I would be fine. But now I think I might just get mated on the spot. Yeah, that's that was really, really stupid. With the king on g8, I could play bishop b2 here and I would be perfectly fine. Yeah. Not at my best right now. Queen f6 just wins on the spot. How do you play king h7 there? That's just ridiculous. How do you play king h7? I completely ignored the whole point of rook f4. If you play king g8 here, in the same position, I go queen c1 check, king h2, bishop b2. I secure the long diagonal, and I think I'm probably better, because the bishop will land on d4, and although even here, to be honest, I'm probably overestimating my position drastically. But anyway, king h7 just loses on the spot, so that's really a weird choice to make. Below 2700. And people are asking about 3200 there. What happened with my earring? Nothing happened with my earring. It's the same earring it was 2 days ago. Not sure what the question is about. This one doesn't seem to be starting, so... Sorry about that. Let's pick somebody else. Whoops. That one also gets aborted because it's a non-premium. Sorry about that as well. Let's try knight f3. It's been a while since I played knight f3. Yeah, that previous game was... it featured, I think, too many horrible mistakes for me to feel happy about. After knight f6, I think we're supposed to go for... What's the prevailing choice here right now? I think I'm supposed to take and go queen b3. Yeah, very few things are as funny as me staring at a screen for 30 seconds and then not making the first move. But you know, every session I'm trying to improve on that somehow, as you can see. This type of position is slightly better for white, certainly, because the queen on c8 is a bit awkward. I will place a rook on c1 soon, and there will be some play against the queen on c8. And also, my bishop on f4 is better than his bishop on f5 because it's much less restricted by pawns. The bishop on f5 is kind of staring at the d3 pawn and not doing very much, and my bishop on f4 is very much an active participant of you know, events here. And now I have a pair of bishops to go with my other advantages. It's still not, you know, anything decisive here, and I should probably pay careful attention, because in these types of positions it's very easy to make a couple of slightly inaccurate moves, and then you suddenly notice your advantage is gone. For instance, here I think black wants to go knight d4, creating a threat of rook takes c3, which will be quite awkward to meet. I was wondering if I should play bishop g5 here, because it might still be a decent idea, actually. Because it's a little bit awkward for black to actually meet this, you know, very straightforward idea of bishop g5 takes f6. I would very much like to see him play knight e8 here, for example, because then let's say my e4 break gains in strength significantly, because it forces more or less black to take on e4. And after knight g4, I think there's a number of very interesting choices for me here. But I think doing the same still makes a lot of sense. Why does nobody play queen b3, queen b6? Those endgames with the doubled pawns on the b7 and b6 squares are supposed to be slightly worse for black, Helion. And when I say supposed to be, I mean they are. It's not, you know, it's not a decisive advantage straight away, but those endgames are not fun to try and hold. But here I should still be careful, because something like rook d1 looks incredibly natural here. But after knight d4, black also threatens to support that knight by e6, e5. And it becomes a bit awkward for white to meet. And if I play h3 after knight e5, I also don't have a comfortable next move. I'm using this rook because I want to sidestep all the forks after knight rook takes c3. If he goes knight d4 here, yeah, and of course Knight d4 is a brave move to make, and not every single player will play it in a blitz game. But knight d4 was more critical than this. Here I get a lot of tempi, and I improve the position of my pieces quite significantly. Next move, bishop b3. And then I want to play f4, f5, and just capture the bishop on g6. Yeah, this is now completely winning for me. But knight d4, as mentioned, was a lot more critical because it created some counterplay ideas which were quite viable for black, and generally was just a lot more challenging than allowing me all these tempi. Knight f3 g3, as Stefan says in chat, it is a decent way to get playable positions without studying, as much theory. But there is still quite a serious amount of theory attached to it at the highest level. Of course, the same is true about most openings. They might feel very playable and not very heavily reliant on theory at club level or even, let's say, 2400 level. But the higher up you get, the more work is required to play them. No, I don't think the King's Gambit is coming back gone sailing. I think it's unlikely. I think especially now, in computer times, the risk-reward ratio is just not favorable for white. It doesn't really take too much effort for black to work out if black wants a playable position, that really isn't difficult at all. And if black wants a better position against the King's Gambit, it will require a little bit more work, but it probably is manageable. I think you're supposed to castle because in general this move order allows black to play d5 early, which is supposedly it sort of equalizes on the spot. And because of that, it's not really very favorable for white to play queen d2. You're better off just castling short and giving up on those ambitious ideas of playing for mate. I'm not saying King's Gambit is unplayable, but I think it's very difficult to sustain. You might, throw it in once in a blue moon, in a not hugely critical game, or the other way around in a game where there is no real difference for you between a win and a draw and a loss, and a win does give you a lot, so you just want to increase the price of a move as much as possible and make the position as complicated and as double-edged as possible as early on as possible. Julio Grande is a very, very interesting player and a very non-standard player. I haven't played against him much, but the games I did play against him, it was quite obvious that, let's say, compared to me, and I don't mean this in any kind of a critical way, our upbringing is dramatically different, and access to material simply it was dramatically different, let's say, in my childhood and his childhood. But it's quite obvious that he more or less taught himself chess. His approach to chess is of someone who hasn't read very many books and just kind of learned by playing and by watching what people do against him mainly, I think. And I'm sure he, over the years, he's acquired a lot of... he knows when he wants, he can play theoretical lines quite well, but in general, he is, I think, a prime example of somebody who became incredibly strong by himself, more or less. And here my opponent sort of drifted into a very unpleasant position. I'm already winning a great deal of material here. This endgame is objectively lost. And also, for a change, I have 2 minutes against 15 seconds. What's my advice for somebody who is 1500 and how to make progress and at least get to 2000 in 1 year? I think it's mainly about practice. It's about practice, but you need to take your practice seriously. You don't, I keep on saying, and I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record on these subjects, but the same kinds of questions keep on cropping up in every session. And I answer them truthfully, and my answer therefore doesn't really change very much. It's about practice against people who are slightly better than you, and also you need to treat every single game you play seriously. If, let's say, you play a lot of chess online, you still need to take every single blitz game you play, treat every single blitz game you play as a serious chess game. Try to make as good, the best decisions you can find in every single position. I understand it's difficult, and in a blitz game in particular, it will become quite hard as time gets short. But still, sort of no kidding around. Approach it seriously. Play your own openings. And if possible, maybe look at those games afterwards. Try and see what you may have done wrong and so on. I'm not sure I've done this correctly, because if I play d6 here, I've drifted into a line I actually played quite seriously when I was younger. But that's not a very nice line. I mean, it's playable, but it's not enjoyable. And I don't really see any choice. I mean, I can play knight h5 straight away, but I don't see what that gives me. Apart from some very, very fancy queen sacrifices, which are not correct. And I just said I should play, you should approach every game seriously. So probably if I just sacrifice my queen here immediately and drift into a losing position just to amuse the masses, it will be I will be setting a poor example. I could play knight h5, he goes either bishop e2 or queen d2, and then I could play queen h4 check, bishop f2, and then take on f2 and take on d4. This is the queen sacrifice I was talking about. But it just isn't correct. White's position is nowhere near as weakened, and white is nowhere near as poorly developed as is required to make such stuff work. And this line is just, tremendously boring in general. I mean, it can become very fun, but for that to happen, white kind of needs to cooperate. And in most cases in this line, black suffers in a slightly worse position. I will play f5 here, which is not really a good move. Probably isn't even playable in this position, actually, now that I think about it. Or maybe it is. The way they do it these days is they take on d4 here, bishop takes d4, they go knight f4, and then they take on e2, and then they play this position. With the light square bishop, they generally end up with a position. The light square bishop is developed via b6 to b7. And white gets a knight against that bishop. And that knight eventually goes to d5, where it's snapped off by the bishop on b7. And black attempts to hold that slightly worse endgame. Azerbaijani players, I think Rauf Mamedov and Gadir Guseynov in particular, are incredibly proficient at this, and they have been doing this quite successfully for some time, but I don't feel up to it. It just isn't a fun way to play, and this, on the other hand, is at least potentially a very fun way to play. But my opponent should not have allowed f4 and bishop e5. It gives black a lot of counterplay, which he normally doesn't get here. What do I think about playing something like knight f3 and c4 when you're young? You can play whatever you like when you're young. I'm just saying that if you don't play the open structures with either color, if you play exclusively the closed openings with both colors when you're young, you're missing out on a lot of stuff which will be very difficult to learn properly when you grow up. There's actually no mate. I'm very saddened by this. This is a good reaction by my opponent. And now I have to switch to something prosaic. I'm still doing perfectly fine here, but it's kind of regrettable that there's no immediate mate here. This makes a lot of sense strategically, but it also weakens my opponent's position. I mean, the light squares get severely weakened here. I just need to make sure I don't get mated somehow. Maybe starting with queen h4 was even better. But that's a bit inconsistent, because I think the whole point of playing f5 was to restrict my light square bishop, you know, as dramatically as possible. And by doing this, my opponent has given me all those squares again. The bishop will get developed to e6 now, and I mean, this structure favors black a great deal, especially because black has the bishops against the bishop and knight. I missed knight d5 though. Knight d5 just now would have been maybe a very strong move. Quite probably. I think I still enjoy playing you know, the most out of all the hats I wear, so to speak. Any comments on Zenit's comeback against Maccabi today? I haven't actually seen the game, shamefully. I've become a bit of a... I wouldn't call a fair weather supporter. I just, frankly, I don't really care as much about Zenit as I used to when I was younger. And that's just how things are. You know, I care a lot more about, let's say, Middlesex's chances of becoming county champions. I don't know what that says about me. Let's play someone slightly weaker for a change. That actually is a bit of a strange situation here. A FIDE master with a rating of 1656. I don't quite understand how this happened. I wouldn't say India was unlucky to miss out on a medal. I think they haven't played better than the teams that got the medal, Pramod, but India definitely was one of the more exciting teams in the event. It was a pleasure to play them, watch them play. But yeah, I think the top three are deserved. That's not taking anything away from the Indians and the way they played, but there are many strong teams in this tournament, and you know, if there were 4 medals, they would be my definite choice for a 4th medal, but there's only 3. I don't think I will be commenting on the World Championship much at the venue. I might do it for Chess 24, but I haven't heard anything from Aegon. I don't know if they've already settled on who they want, but it's mid-September and it's, you know, two months before the match, so you would assume they probably settled on somebody. Question from Fradedi. What's my opinion on c4, knight f6, knight c3, e6, e4, d5 at the top level? Is it worth studying? If you want to try and play the English and then you don't really want to play the Queen's Gambit declined, I think you will eventually have to look at this, is what I will say. I mean, I have some definite opinions on specific lines there because I had to study it quite seriously for the candidates, obviously, since I decided to make I decided to make 1c4 my main weapon at the candidates, but I don't think it makes too much sense for me to go into, you know, serious detail in terms of specific variations in the middle of this show. I probably misplayed this a little bit because, you know, I'd be extremely happy if I were white in this position, which is generally a sign you've done something wrong. I kind of want to play b5, but I'm trying to justify, you know, it's a sacrifice of a full rook, and it would require some justification, which I currently cannot find, because I think you know, every tempo will be counted here. There's really absolutely no time to waste for me as black here, and I would very much like to already have a bishop on b7 in this position. I can play g5 here, and I think I actually have to. By GM, yeah, I can't pronounce that. But dinner takes precedence over everything, obviously. I fully appreciate that. This probably objectively is horrible, but I think in the position I had, this is the best chance, and it also is definitely the best chance in practical terms, because it's bound to confuse my opponent a little bit. I'm just ignoring this for now because I want as many of these pawns in front of my king as possible. I don't want to. If I eventually am forced to recapture on g4, I definitely do not want I want the white pawn on g5 is what I'm trying to say, to keep the g file at least partly closed. If it's 2 a.m., I think you should go with sleep rather than food, I'm pretty sure. Eating at 2 a.m. is, you know, in my experience, not a very bright idea. But actually, now that he's played h6, I feel a bit better about taking on f4, although maybe not right now. But I think I can actually. I think I can do this. I mean, it's very risky, but I don't think I'm losing on the spot, and then maybe I can stabilize somehow. But probably this wasn't. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weird because on the one hand, you kind of want to settle the position on the king side, but on the other hand, it makes my opponent's life a lot easier as well. So that was probably not a particularly wise choice. There is this tactical idea of knight takes e4 here, but I don't think it works currently, which is regrettable because I really want to play it. I'm trying to figure out if I can prepare it somehow, but I don't think I can. But if you want to do something really, really badly, you probably just should. It's just such nice geometry. The thing is, unfortunately, you know, I end up in a position where I don't have full compensation. Rook he1 though is a mistake. Now I'm definitely happy with that I've done this. But had he played Rook h2, which you know, it seems a bit weirder than Rook he1, but it's a better move. Then I think he would have been better. Here I'm less sure, even though Knight d2 is still quite awkward to meet actually. I'm not sure I kept the right bishop. That was just a bit of a hasty decision. I should probably have kept the other bishop. But this is a playable position at least. I think I can do this. I'm not sure I should, but I think I can. And at least, you know, it solves my issues with this pawn on h6, because it's always, you know, it's a thorn in my side in all of these positions. Does he? Ah, okay. I was kind of worried he will play knight d7, but here I'm definitely fine. I just need not to blunder, because I want to go rook d4 here, but then knight d6 is actually very annoying. I should start with rook c7, I think. And once again, I'm drifting here. My last number of moves was substandard, is what I want to call it. Not very good at all. I'm actually kind of lucky I'm surviving here, because more than surviving, I'm probably winning here, because my opponent probably missed that I have rook takes c2. And that shouldn't work either. I'm just winning a lot of material here. But... and this is mate in 2 suddenly. That was an interesting geometrical motif, but objectively, I think it was better to keep the tension somewhere here, because I had a lot of... this situation on the key, in the center was actually, I think, harder for white to deal with properly than it was for black. So maybe it wasn't such a bright idea to take on f4. But I'm quite happy I managed to show you this this little bit of tactic, because it's very easy to miss, and it doesn't really give me such a great position, but it's a nice little combination to show on stream. Knight e8 instead of g6. I think rook b4 check is winning there, Fradetti. Oops. Okay. Oops actually was completely uncalled for there, because I scrolled sort of through the chat and over the chat in the window I used for chat, but you didn't see that, so there was no real need for me oopsing there. All the same people. And this is the game that almost but not quite started a moment ago, so let's give... I saw Melkor in chat saying that he is now back at the machine, so let's give him a chance. I generally play knight f3 here, but let's try this. This leads to, you know, wilder stuff that I have no knowledge about whatsoever, but just to sort of take myself out of the comfort zone immediately. I firmly believe knight f3 is just a more sensible way to play there, because it avoids all the ridiculous stuff black gets in this line, or there's also this d4 bishop g4 line which people like to play. e6 here is a bit ambitious, I think. I don't think you can actually justify this. I think he was supposed to play b5 in this position. Here I think I'm just more or less a healthy pawn up. Why doesn't anyone play c4 after queen takes d5? Because it's not a very good move. If you can play knight c3, why would you want to play c4? c4 doesn't develop a piece, it creates a hole on d4, which black might be able to exploit later. I'm not sure why I did that, but I mean, my position is good enough that I can make some less than perfect moves here. The bishop on c8 is just such a sad piece here. I can also flick in bishop g5 to make him play knight 7 f6 and only then play rook e1, and now I mean, even with a pawn on f7, I would consider my position to be hugely better here because of the very poor bishop on c8, which might never actually see the light of day, so to speak. But without the pawn on f7, this is just completely winning for white. Yeah, and this either loses a full piece or gh queen g4 is mate in 2, so yeah, that game is effectively over. Full piece up and continue the attack on the king side. Every single white piece is better than the black piece. And this loses more material, but it doesn't really matter anymore. The whole thing just collapses. You can place a light piece for black on more or less any square here, and white will still be close to winning, maybe winning. I'm looking for fresh names in the challenge list, but it's very difficult. I think even if I haven't played all of you guys, I at least recognize your names in the list, and it becomes very confusing to find people I haven't played before. What shall I do against 1c4? I've been playing g6 today, but it's not been serving me particularly well. But let's stick with it, maybe I will get a King's Indian. Yeah, and c4, g6, g3 should just be disallowed. It kind of takes all the fun out of an already less than fun evening. I will not go on another Hearthstone related rant, I already started with one, but I get very salty. I've won some completely lost positions in my life, but I think I'm more well known, Pramod, for resigning a bit early rather than a bit late. What am I supposed to do here? To make it slightly more offbeat and interesting for all parties concerned. The thing about what I'm doing right now is it probably leads to a very bad position, as I now realize. Apart from the fact that if white wants, he can still get a pretty symmetrical position in which he will be the side with slightly more space. There's also the issue he could have played d4 on the previous move, and then he could have taken on c5 and taken on d8, and it's possible that black is just in a lot of trouble there. Although maybe not. And this is a fairly usual type of position black gets in this line, which is supposed to be fine, but it's also not really something you enjoy particularly. Mr. Robot is a show which started very promisingly and then I think deteriorated to such an extent that, you know, very, very unusually for me, I'm actually not watching the second season. I've given up on very few shows in my life. Despite the fact that this leads to me, you know, not having any free time and having a terabyte hard drive completely filled with stuff I still haven't watched. Still, I don't give up on shows lightly, but Mr. Robot just became so predictable and so frankly uninteresting that I gave up on it altogether. I'm trying to figure out if I can take this pawn. I mean, I can play something like d5 and be fine, but I would like to take this pawn. But there is actually quite a lot of play if I do. Quite a lot of play for white, and it might actually not be correct to do it. If there is such a thing. Yeah, let's do something else. I could play knight f5 though. I completely ignored a move which was probably the best in the position. Yeah, but you see, the thing about Mr. Robot and Jan is that Jan also started pushing it very, very heavily after having seen, I think, the first episode. And I could understand that, because the first episode is very decent. But his conclusion by the end of the first series was the same as mine. I don't think he's watching season 2 either. It was just such a severe disappointment. I mean, do they honestly think no one has seen Fight Club? Who are they aiming this at? What's the supposed audience? Should have gone d5 and knight e4. c5 is a bit more than a bit passive, and it gives me a lot of very nice squares for my pieces. I will play the 8 game when this is done. I'm pretty sure late reg is about 4 hours, right? If the question is why I'm not doing both at the same time, is you know, I'm not crazy enough. You really don't want to buy pieces of me in the 8 game. That's not a good investment, man. I've kind of ignored the game for a little bit, but seriously, in this position, if he goes d5 followed by knight e4, I might get mated. Whereas the position he got in the game, I have, you know, the bishop on b2 is a very pitiful side here, as opposed to that line in which he would potentially develop a huge attack on the dark squares. So that, I think, was a huge misplay by my opponent. Well stated, Lini. I'm not that bad, but still, it's not a good investment. This should be reasonably comfortably convertible, I think. You play bishop f8 and you start pushing. There's also an opportunity to maybe create something on the king side if my opponent is not careful. I would probably play h5, try and, you know, rook e1 is a good move. Let's try for a cheapo here, creating a threat of rook takes f4. No, I don't think Eugenio's performance is engine. That's actually, you know, very... Even with a smiley face on the end, I think that's incredibly offensive. I think he's a tremendously strong player who, you know, had a fantastic performance. And now that I managed to open up the king side, this should be reasonably comfortably winnable. I'm not sure about queen e4 check though. This may have been unnecessary because I'm kind of struggling for a move here. Although knight e3 seems to be strong. It's been said by wiser people than myself that winning a winning position is maybe the hardest thing in chess, and there is something to that. I should be somehow winning immediately here, but once again, don't see it, we'll make a normal move and go from there. How do you become better at winning positions? I think it's practice, and also, I mean, there are some general guidelines you can follow, as in don't assume your opponent will just roll over and die, is a very good rule. Expect to, against somebody who knows how to defend, a very good rule of thumb is you should expect to have to calculate a long, reasonably difficult variation at least once per game, even if your position looks like it's a safely winning position with no counterplay currently. Against a good defender, you will at some point be forced to work. And you have to expect that and you have to be ready for that. But in general, I think it's practice more than anything else. Yeah, both of the title match finalists this year are exceptionally good at holding positions which look horrible. He did say that, Count Yellow, and I actually had a discussion about this with a friend of mine, as to, you know, whether this was over the top, and it depends on how often he repeats that joke. I think every now and again this is fine, but if he starts really pushing this joke, then it's slightly unnecessary. I will postpone taking on g3 because I don't think he can actually do very much about it. But I will have to take on g3 at some point, and then maybe even somewhat regrettably go for an endgame. Because with the knight on d5 in these structures, you know, black's position looks very attractive, but there are actually very limited possibilities to create something if white doesn't want you to create anything here. So Queen a5 is definitely a move you would consider. It feels a bit sad to be doing that, but... And actually he takes and he plays knight d4, and he forces me to trade the e6 bishop for one of his knights. Which is not something I would necessarily welcome, but I honestly don't see much else that makes any sense. Yeah, this is correctly played by my opponent, and now I have a slightly unpleasant choice because none of these, the options available to me here are particularly attractive. Maybe I can make this work. Maybe this creates some situations where it's a bit awkward for him to go after my bishop. I don't give very many simuls in general, but I'm not against the idea in principle if that's what you're asking. Silberuken. This is a decent move, but it kind of gives me some options which I feel weren't there a moment ago, but maybe they're still not very good. I can take on d5, for instance, and play rook c5, and this puts serious amounts of pressure on the d5 pawn, at least at that moment, but bishop f3 seems to deal with those sufficiently. Maybe I should try and keep the bishop alive. It might be risky, but if I do get to play e6 next move, this will be fantastic for me, of course. And it was important to include knight c4 in the previous move because this stops knight b6. If I play bishop b7 before playing knight c4, of course I would play knight b6 and knight takes d7. I'm a reasonably chill person in general, I think, but I do get angry every now and again, of course. Everybody does, I feel. Now I'm quite happy about my position. It's still not massively better or anything, but this is a much better setup. The bishop on d7 now feels safe, the bishop on g7 is also okay, and this is a type of endgame that black generally enjoys in the Sicilians. I don't know how seriously I should approach the questions about my next tournament because I've been answering them for a week. And, maybe there should be a banner somewhere, like somewhere in the layout of the show there should be a banner saying next tournament Tal Memorial in September. This is a weird little move, but I want to kind of hint to my opponent that he should pay attention to the g2 pawn maybe in some positions. And f5, I would normally, this is something I very much wanted to provoke. Because now I have such fantastic squares for my pieces. Like the f6 is a great piece for this bishop on g7. The e5 square is also fantastic. I can try and get my rook over there. Now I have a lot of play against his center. It's kind of important not to blunder anything though. Rook c5 may have been slightly optimistic, although I still don't see how I get punished for it. This is well played. This I actually missed. This is very well played by my opponent. I like this. I think my position is still fine, but it's, you know, very well spotted by eel roll. This probably is a draw of some kind. He probably can just make a forced draw, sadly, with rook h8, rook h7. It's happy, you know. Now I feel I should be better, but he probably could have just ended the game there and then by giving a check and going rook h7 back and forcing me to go back to d8, because bishop e8 would be a huge threat there. You know, it's slightly confusing that I thought this is so great for me, but maybe it is actually. I can't claim I actually calculated up to here when I was playing e5, but this is very strong. And yeah, this position is completely winning for black. The d and e pawns will just win. Nothing really gets in the way. I mean, I'm not doing it correctly, but it probably still is enough with time to spare. I'm pretty sure I could have done this more efficiently, but this is good enough. Pawns like this are incredibly difficult to stop. So yeah, this just briefly to touch on this again. I think he should have switched to equalizing here and rook h7, rook h8 check, and rook h7 back. The threat of bishop e8 is just too strong here. If I play king c6, I actually lose a piece after d5 check. So I felt like I would probably have to go king d8 back and allow this threefold. Is this a case of 2 runs faster than 1? 2 just runs incredibly fast when there are 2 connected passers in the center, together with a more active king. It doesn't. Nothing else really matters. They just queen themselves. I was wondering why people were suddenly, you know, I had to scroll up quite a long way up to figure out why people were suddenly discussing if I was married or not. But if the choice was exactly as it was stipulated, yeah, I'd be probably at home studying the Grunfeld. Even if I wasn't married, sadly. I don't know why I keep on subjecting myself to this. It doesn't feel particularly enjoyable to be playing this with black. I'm kind of curious, because in many cases this is quite good for white, this idea of allowing knight takes b5, but with a knight still on g8 it might be playable, no? I'm a little bit curious about this. Because generally white wins a lot of time here, because black plays this with the knight already developed to f6, and then white has this tempo he can win by playing e4, e5. But here, bishop b7 was a bit hasty, because now I have no good reply to a4. a4 just now would have been incredibly difficult to meet, but what my opponent is doing is also quite decent, I feel. More than decent, maybe. I actually have no comfortable way of meeting this either. You know, to such an extent that I'm kind of considering playing f6 here. But f6 is just not a move you want to make in a Sicilian. It's not a viable option almost ever. But I dislike my position strongly enough to try this. Simply because I need to win some time to develop my pieces. And this way, I drive the queen away and I'm in time to play bishop b4. And then I'm in time to play knight e7. And hopefully I will be able to fight for the central squares there and maybe survive somehow. But this definitely falls under the header of don't try this at home. This will, in general, almost never work. I wonder if I should take on c3 here. Rook c8 is also a consideration. Rook c8 is probably a more sensible choice. This position now is suddenly quite playable, but generally I had to, you know, I had to do something very, very unnatural and unusual for a Sicilian to get to here. Now black is perfectly fine. It is bedtime for me, but as was already established during the show, I'm still doing half an hour of this, and then I will subject myself to the torture that is a multi-table tournament. I quite like knight h4. This is a good move. This shows very good awareness by my opponent. I can ignore it for now, though. Knight c3 bishop b5 has not been invented by Squall, obviously, but lots of strong players have played this over the years. I think I can drive this away by doing this here. Okay. That makes sense. Bring it back to e3. In general, I'm very impressed with how Squall has been dealing with this. I think he's played this game quite well up to now. f5 will be met by f4, and that actually is quite awkward for me to deal with. But I still feel I have to. f4 I think I need to take, and maybe I actually was a little bit over optimistic. I maybe should have brought the rook back first. It's important for me to keep control of the d4 square here, because if the queen lands there, I will be in trouble. And now there's a question of which rook goes to e8 and e5. It's probably this rook because I don't want to get mated. After rook f e8, I have a feeling knight takes f5 may have just been mate. And now I blundered knight g4. I'm not sure it's mate, but it's incredibly dangerous. So yeah, a number of missed opportunities by my opponent, and now I'm winning. But yeah, I think he played really well in the beginning of that game. I actually once won a game in which I was ahead on the clock by stopping speaking. This might be a good recipe. Which Super GM do you think will be the most entertaining in the Banter Blitz in terms of banter? I think there's a great number of really strong players who'd be excellent in this format, but who don't do that because they have too much self-respect or haven't been offered, an opportunity. Two people mentioned in this chat already, I think, are excellent picks, both Grishuk and Aronian. Grishuk, I mean, in Russian he'd be sensational, and in English also very, very good, although... and he would also play a lot better than me because his sentences would be shorter. But generally, I think you just get no access to that because these people don't stream and they are not, public blitz players. But in my experience, if you could see, some of the friendly blitz sessions at the end of super tournaments, for instance, you would immediately see just how great that would be if you could stream that. Let's say after Singfield finished, there were a number of blitz sessions at the chess houses close to the chess club with most of the tournament present, playing each other and drinking and having fun, and almost every single one of those players would be tremendous at this format, I think. I'm not saying I'm not good at it. I'm just saying that there's a lot of really, really top players who'd be also fantastic. I'm not for a change. I'm not really being self-deprecating. I'm just saying that sadly the world has no access to all that, but those people would be fantastic as well. No, Grishuk is not shy. He is a very private person. He doesn't really... I should have stopped e5. My last two moves were just completely not on point. Black generally doesn't take with the d-pawn in this position, and white should just play e5, maybe even straight away. And in particular after queen c7, not playing e4, e5 in this position is just absolutely criminal. I should maybe concentrate on the game a little bit more. Giving black this structure when you could actually prevent this is beyond stupid. f6 is perfectly fine here. I'm not sure what is worrying my opponent here. Okay. My opponent is not worried at all. My opponent is playing very concretely. If I take on e5 here, he can play f6, and this knight is actually trapped. It's very smart, but also, in many cases, black is not particularly happy to play b5 in these structures. So it might backfire as well. It's not immediately obvious if this is stronger than f6, because f6 was just perfectly fine. By playing b5, you do create some targets for white to play against on the queen side, which could be very useful. Kramnik also belongs on that list. I think there are very, very few people in the top 10 who would not be able to do very, very good bunters. Because I think we all grow up in this, this idea of playing blitz with friends whilst also making fun of what's going on the board. It's very much what every young player goes through. I feel I need to do this because I need to play for this structure. It's not that great, but otherwise, if I allow black to play, let's say, bishop b6 and f6, he might later in the game just to recapture on b5 with the a pawn, and I will not have this play against the d5 square. But back to my point, I think this idea of playing blitz with friends and bantering as you're playing is, very much part of all the top players' upbringing. So the format would not be alien to any of them. Do I buy Giri's concept of Chinese school of chess? I would have to acquaint myself with the concept to say anything about it. I'm not sure what Anish said on the subject, so I can't really comment. What's in the bookcase behind you? The bookcase behind me has... I'm not sure there's so much stuff there. To my right there's a Kinky Friedman collection. There's also the entire Sandman run. There's a great number of things in the bookshelves behind me. There's also my complete Ian Rankin collection, all kinds of stuff. My bishop on b2 is not very useful, and I'm actually being slowly outplayed by my opponent here. This is not a good game, to be honest. I mean, after the way he treated the opening, the fact that I'm now, maybe even worse, to be honest, because rook c8 c2 is a huge threat here, is worrying me a great deal. You should not be in any kind of danger whatsoever if your opponent plays bishop takes c6, dc6. And I think objectively my position might be lost here, to be honest, if he continues playing the best moves, which he seems to be doing currently. I will just eventually run out of squares to put my pieces on, despite currently being a pawn up. Just not a very well played game at all. Not quite sure what is up with people with these types of rating playing this well today. Yeah, to be honest, in a normal game, you feel a very strong temptation to resign here, to be honest, because you're just not getting out of this corner. If you have to consider moves like bishop c1 right now, it means something has gone badly wrong. I read the first part of... no, I misread the question there from Stefan. Takes on rook c3 is very strong now. Or rook c3 straight away, frankly. I don't know why I played queen b3. I wanted to play queen f3. Not that it would necessarily change the assessment as such. Yeah, the thing about this position is I'm not sure how many moves I need to even get my pieces to any kind of decent squares. And yeah, the bishop comes over to d4, and I am still some serious time away from any kind of stabilization here. b3 is probably the best move here to make sure I don't develop anything here. We could try and flag this guy, but don't really feel like it, to be honest. It's, you know, I generally don't do this, but something about that game kind of made me feel like maybe I should try and win this on time. But it's just, you know, it's not part of this stream to be doing that. Weird game, to be honest. I'm confused by many aspects of it. But I'm completely lost here as well, probably. Rook c3, knight e3, king takes d7, knight d5, and rook goes anywhere, like rook c4 probably. And my back rank problems will mean that I'm not in... No, rook c4, knight b6 check, so rook somewhere. Rook... Maybe I'm not losing. Maybe I actually am not losing anymore, who knows. But yeah, I think the biggest teachable moment about this game is that after d3, queen c7, you just play e5. It's horrible that I haven't. You lock in the bishop on c8, you also make it a lot harder for black to develop the bishop on f8. This knight from it goes via d2 to e4. It's just, you shouldn't be playing an opening like this. D takes c6 is not really played for a reason. Okay, so probably a couple more, and we'll call it a day, since it's already been almost 2 hours. It's funny that you asking me this today, Victor Core, because specifically today I decided to get rid of some stuff because the shelves were completely full, and I have some, you can't see it on the cam, but to my right there's like a coffee table type setup, which was completely overflowing with books as well, and it was becoming a strain on my family life because Olga is not she doesn't like disarray of any kind, so it was becoming an issue. So I decided to actually get rid of some of the stuff I have there. And the question is, I don't really manage it particularly well. It's very difficult to manage the amount of books and magazines I currently have. Not quite sure what I'm doing here. I wanted to play h6 and g5, but then he goes knight g2. I think knight, yeah, and maybe I can do this, but I'm probably not going to be enjoying it anyway. This way I gain some squares for this g7 bishop, but my position probably is still quite unpleasant. I read a lot more in English than I read in Russian, but I do read some things in Russian, and I definitely listen to a decent amount of Russian music, at least I used to. I simply don't listen to a lot of music at all these days, sadly. This now feels like it should be a reasonably playable position. I'm happy that I found this queen d7 f5 maneuver, because it allowed me to at least bring my queen to, some kind of a square where it does something. But white is probably still better objectively. But now that I've established the square on g4 for my knight, I can maybe start something with h5, h4 later in the game. I can play bishop f5 reasonably safely. I will start by playing bishop f5 and then we'll see what's what. If he wants to play b4, it's actually a decent plan. I quite like that. But I do have some play of my own here. I don't really care about the b7 pawn. It doesn't really concern me at all. I want to start something on the king side. And whoops, almost did something very, very wrong by misclicking. I think I did manage to generate a reasonable amount of counterplay here. Which was not at all a given considering the position I got out of the opening. It's still a very unclear position, but at the very least, you know, it's obvious that I have some counterplay. If rook b7, I wanted to take and play queen d3, and I still think it's very strong. Because I suddenly create a lot of threats against his king side. I mean, queen e7 looks scary, but actually my threats are first, I think. I think I'm almost giving mate here. Ah! That's a nice opportunity for me. It's always nice to be able to pull off a nice little combination in one of the last games. Alright, that would have been a decent finishing point, but we still have some time, so let's play a couple more. And I'm aware I played Chess Dude recently, but the list is full of people I have played recently, and I don't really see any new names, so apologies for that. G6 is definitely not the most critical reply to bishop g5, but it's not completely unplayable. I quite like these types of positions for white, actually. I don't know why I chose this. My experiences with this line have generally been quite unfavorable. I think white enjoys this a lot more than black does in most cases. b3, c4. I think it's very important to play this in this precise fashion, not allow black to take on c4 and recapture with a piece. You have to with white in these types of positions, you have to play for as large a center as possible. And yeah, these types of positions are, as I said, they are not horrible for black, but they are quite unpleasant because it's very difficult to generate any kind of counterplay. White has very simple plans. He can play rook b1, a4, a5, put pressure on the b7 pawn. This bishop on c8 has absolutely no future whatsoever. It's very difficult to create any kind of meaningful play which includes it in the game. And yeah, I'm somewhat unhappy with my opening choice there. Sadly, pawn 78, the whole point of this exercise is to create an event in which only premium members can take part. So I have seen your challenge, but rules prohibit me from accepting it. Yeah, and this is kind of the point. I keep on harping on about it, but this is kind of the point. So this is the full extent of my counterplay now. I can play g5, completely destroy my own structure, and that will still not give me a lot of play on the king side. And that's just about it. I can try this, but objectively this probably only makes my position worse. But at least by doing this, I am forcing my opponent to take some decisions, because up until that moment, I feel any half-decent Trempovsky player would be playing completely on autopilot. There were really no decisions that required any kind of thought process from my opponent at all up until that point. And at least by playing c5, I can hope to, provoke some thinking. But, the bar is not being set particularly high here. If I can manage to play knight c5 and rook c8, my position will not be that horrible. I'm slightly surprised that he's taken with the knight. I would have taken with the pawn, because giving me any squares at all for my pieces just feels wrong. Yeah, this feels like a misplay from my opponent, to be honest. This knight should not have had this, such a useful square. I'm probably still objectively worse, but I think compared to, how prospectless my position looked some time ago, this is a tremendous improvement in my fortunes. If he takes with the rook, I can, cb5. The thing about cb5 is that I thought I might have some tactical play against the knight on g5. Queen a2 is an interesting square to choose, but maybe a good one actually. And rook d1 now. Rook d3, knight c3 would be a mistake, I feel, but rook d1 is quite decent. Queen c2. I forgot about queen c2. I may have been unjustly critical about this. This also might be decent, actually. If I don't find some way to activate my pieces straight away, this might be very, very good for white. Should also start playing faster, but that always is a huge challenge for me. Queen a1 is very strong here. This probably loses. What? This I will be in time for. He had to play queen a1 here, so that after queen e2 he could play rook f1. And if he does this in the game, I have rook d1 and I give mate anyway. But if he secures the back rank by playing queen a1 here, after queen a2, rook f1, I don't have... No, but then the bishop on c6 is hanging. We were both going slightly crazy here. I only just realized I can just take on c6 here, which is quite strong. But yeah, people go a bit mad. People go a bit mad on 10 seconds these days. All right, one last one, and we'll call it a day. Also, I wanted to say that we decided that 3 banters in a single week is probably a bit too much. So on Saturday, I will be doing a Q&A session. I think the web link for you to start asking me questions will go live early tomorrow, European time. So feel free asking me, whatever you like. Although, and actually maybe I will just give this speech and we'll call it a wrap for today, because it's been 2 hours and I generally want to keep it to 2 hours. I want to speak a little bit more about this Q&A, and if at all possible, I wanted to sort of make a direct appeal to you guys for a favor. I understand that this is maybe the most pressing question people have, but I'm seriously running out of ways to answer the question, how do I become better at chess? I am, let's say, I don't know, 17, 19, 20, 100, and I want to become 19, 21, 2300 in a year. What should I do to improve my chess? I've answered that question in previous Q&As. Yeah, and Zomfunk is doing my job for me in chat there. It's not that I don't understand that this is a perfectly valid question. I'm just seriously completely running out of different ways to answer it. I'm very much on the record with my opinions on the subject, and you can find them in previous Q&As. I also touched on it even in this Banter Blitz and in the previous Banter Blitz and in the one before that. So I probably will still get some of those, and I will, if they form a critical mass, let's put it like this, I will answer some of them. But I would very much prefer if we tried to cover some fresher topics. So that will be on Saturday. I'm not exactly sure what time, but there will be an announcement on the website. And thanks for watching, and see you then. This has been Peter Svidler for Chess24.